And he just like looked at me and was like, that's not going to happen. You're not going to be good at sales. And I'm like, why do you think that? I haven't even tried. And it was very simply like, but you're a chick.
What? Welcome to the Reach Further podcast, where we share insights from experts who have experienced it all. We hope these conversations will spark ideas for you to become the successful entrepreneur that you are meant to be. Brought to you by East West Bank, your financial bridge. Hey everybody, I'm Mindy.
And I'm Angela.
Welcome to the Reach Further podcast, episode number 1.
Our first episode ever.
I know, we are so excited.
And a little nervous, not gonna lie. But mostly we're excited.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And we are most excited for the launch of this podcast because this is the month of March, which is Women's History Month.
Mm-hmm. And this podcast is launching on March 8th, which is International Women's Day.
Oh my gosh, that's so perfect because our first guest, she is a powerful female leader executive. And she has 10 years of experience in new media, advertising, and technology industry.
And not only that, she's been uplifting women throughout her entire career, breaking barriers, shattering that glass ceiling.
Yes. So that's why we are so excited to have her on our first inaugural episode. But before we start,
we would just like to remind you to subscribe to the Reach Further podcast. You can find out more information at eastwestbank.com/reachfurtherpodcast.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
And hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our uploads. We've got some important content coming your way.
Yes. So without further ado,
we would like to introduce to you Maytal Shainberg, Senior Vice President of New Media Lending at East West Bank. Thank you so much for joining us, Maytal. So you're a woman executive who is absolutely kicking butt in her industry, but obviously you didn't start there. You had to work your way up. Can you tell us about how, when you first started on your career path and the challenges that you faced as a woman in such a male-dominated industry?
Look, in the digital media and technology space, as well as finance, to be honest with you, but especially in that space, I came across a bunch of men in a room all the time. Like the laughing joke growing up, gaining momentum in my career was I was the only female at a table with like 12 other dudes, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember very distinctly, I think it was my second or third job out of college, and I had an inkling that I'd be really good at sales. And so I asked my manager if I could try, like, don't pay me extra. If I close something, great. If I don't, no sweat off your back. I'll do it sort of after work on my downtime. And he just like looked at me and was like, that's not going to happen. You're not going to be good at sales. And I'm like, why do you think that? I haven't even tried. And it was very simply like, but you're a chick. And he said it so nonchalantly, like that was such a normal thing to say. And, you know, this is before Me Too, before any sort of let's empower women to do whatever they need to do in order to encourage them to grow in their career. And I was like, okay, I hear you. And I went home that night and I'm like, this is ridiculous. I don't want to work in an environment that promotes this kind of behavior. And so I quit the next day, not having anything lined up. And I was very quickly able to get another job, and I actually started selling at my next job. Very low level, but climbed up very quickly. And the moment I was able to get a managerial position, and this was sort of 2 jobs later, the first thing I implemented was like, okay, how do I create a peer group around younger females trying to do sort of anything, right? Mm-hmm. And it started at these like monthly luncheons, and then it turned into I would just mentor people who are 4, 5, 6 years beneath me, like just coming out of college or figuring out their resume. And what I found was, you know, there's this notion, and it's true, right? Like females are generally very scared to demand anything. And so we kind of take for granted how men just have so much more, not necessarily confidence, they just have a much more expectant mentality, right? So, we went through a bunch of different exercises, like how do you negotiate your salary? How do you talk about your resume in a way which it makes sense? How are you unapologetic about anything and everything you do, right? And so as I grew in my career, I've been able to sort of help guide, the younger generation to figure out, how do you demand more money? And, the laughing joke in my immediate family is I have 3 brothers and 1 sister. And my little sister is 9 years younger than me. And she reminds me on a daily basis that she's making more money than me than when I was her age. And she attributes that to me and watching me and helping her. But, there's nothing that makes me happier in life than like having a female sort of take charge, own what she has to offer, and do it unapologetically.
Oh, definitely. She sounds so confident, just like her sister. Can you tell us where this confidence comes from?
90% a show. Like, it's literally, I still go to networking events dreading them. Like, everyone thinks, oh, Maytal, she's a social butterfly. She loves it, that she feeds off that energy. And in a sense, it's true. But, like, I was at a networking event last week, and I'm like, oh, my God, I'm going to kill myself. I know. And I knew everybody there. But I like, everyone gets in their own head. That's like a thing, right? And so I used to have this rule that I kind of tell everybody who's trying to be in sales and break through and network. I have 2 rules. When you're in person, you're allowed to leave after you've spoken to 3 people. And when you're on email or you finally get introduced to somebody, you can't leave the meeting without 1 takeaway and 3 introductions to somebody else. Typically what ends up happening in the first scenario is once you've spoken to the third person, you're having a great time, you're not leaving, right? It's just getting your feet wet is sort of the scary part. And the second part is sometimes you'll have a meeting and it's a complete dud. You've gained no knowledge, like the deal's going nowhere, nothing's happening. But if you could at least extract 3 different introductions from that same person, well, then it's sort of a domino effect, right? And so how are you always learning? How are you always growing? And that's it's my rule of 3, both in person and on email.
Having done that, have you ever faced any kind of resistance from, I don't know, meeting with men or whatever? Because as you said, in general, women fear asking for things. I think partly because it's stigmatized as us being viewed as pushy or,
Oh, 100%. I
was going to say bitchy, but
totally. So yeah, I've met resistance a ton. I had one job where I always felt like I was being underpaid, no matter what I was doing. Like, I knew that I had a counterpart and he was making more than me. And I would fight and demand and this and that. And it was always like this long drawn out process where both people felt really crappy. Then I would finally get what I wanted. But from, the CEO and COO's perspective, they were doing me such a favor, And so I'm left feeling like, okay, I asked for 35%. They gave me 10%. I should be really happy with the 10%. And then it came to a point where I was just like, this isn't working for me anymore. Like, yes, they say in negotiations, no one should be happy at the end of it, but like, I shouldn't be depressed, right? Like, they're unhappy. I feel really crappy and like it's eating me up a couple days later. So then you kind of know something's like not working, right? So I think there's a normal amount of resistance that should be met. But what I tell people all the time is if you're still thinking about it a week later and you're still unhappy, then have the confidence that you're going to find something else, someone else who will value that time, that effort, that energy that you're putting into the world. The millennials, I think, in general, don't understand their value, right? You get really complacent, really comfortable where you are, and you're scared for change. You're scared to ask for that raise. You're scared to ask for that promotion. And so you don't, as opposed to just reframing. So like, I'm a big framer, right? Like, you don't have to say, hey, I worked really hard, I want more money. The question can simply be, well, how do you value X, Y, and Z that I did? How do you think about when you're thinking about a promotion or a salary increase or a bonus? Be very specific with what you've accomplished or what you think you've accomplished. Put the onus on your manager or your husband or your partner, whomever, right? Like this is everything. Like I watched the kids for 4 days while you were traveling, and I got dinner on the table, and I did all the laundry. Like, how do you value that, right? And I'm a very big proponent of this book called The 5 Languages of Love, because I think everybody has a different language of love, right? And so at least your inner circle, right, who you manage, who you report to, you should really work hard to understand what their language of love is, because everybody has sort of, it might not be money for everybody. It might just be words of appreciation. Like I have some folks on my team, they don't necessarily care. They're not driven by money. They're driven by, you did a great job.
Recognition.
I couldn't have done it without you.
Speaking of recognition, we would be remiss not to mention a couple of amazing things happening in your life as of late. And I'll just mention two. The first one being that you are being profiled as part of the 2022 Visionaries issue of the Los Angeles Times Magazine. So yay! And the second, and I think it's more important, is that you have a new member to your family. And you just recently came back from maternity leave. So the question is, with all the things that are happening around your life lately and with this whole COVID epidemic, new way of living and coming back to work and being a new mom, how do you balance everything?
Lots of wine.
They deliver that now.
There's no wine in that cup that mug, by the way.
Maybe
wants everyone to know. I just want to make sure everybody knows.
It has not been easy. I think COVID has been a very interesting case study in how to manage your time most effectively. And I think I've done a really good job balancing, although to be honest, it's a lot. I'm not going to say it's not a lot, right? It's a lot of prepping and planning and organizing, and those sort of aren't my strong suits in general. That's been a struggle.
You are very honest.
I am very honest.
Just being honest here. This is an honest conversation,
to
folks.
a fault, So yes, I'm very, very, very honest at all times, probably to a fault, and I'm surprised it hasn't gotten me fired yet. But here I am. I'm still here.
You're here. You're doing great.
So look, like I've leaned on my team significantly. I've also been able to grow my team significantly since being here, so that's for sure been helping. But I love what I do, and I think that's my balancing act. Like I think it would have been much harder if I wasn't excited to wake up and go to work every day. But I love doing deals. I love getting into new companies and understanding workflows and all that fun stuff. And so it's exhausting. I'm super tired all the time, but I drink a ton of coffee, and after 5, I drink a ton of wine.
So you're talking about boundaries in your personal life. So how does that translate into your work life? Because I feel like a lot of people, especially these days, like don't know how to set up their work life boundaries.
Correct.
Right.
Especially when you have teams that are on the East Coast and West Coast, right? And so I'm not very good at it. That part I will tell you. There's no such thing as like, going on vacation and unplug. Like I don't have that. Although I am a Sabbath observer. So I'm Jewish and I'm Orthodox. And so from Friday night to Saturday night, 25 hours, no TV, no phones, no electricity, no nothing. And that's sort of my meditative reset stage so that I could get back at it for the whole week. But in terms of boundaries at work, I wouldn't necessarily call them boundaries. I think I call them, I set expectations, right? And I'm constantly talking to my team about this also, because I think that there's an element of, I need to set expectations with my superiors, my peers, and they need to set expectations, again, going up. And whoever's listening, like, you need to set expectations with your clients. You need to set expectations with your spouses, with your managers, with your direct report, so that everyone knows, what does ASAP mean to you, right? And when you send an email and you request something, like, how long should that take? And I had a friend who, she took it sort of to the next level, which I thought was an interesting way to do it, but it might be useful for somebody who's listening. To her team, she would write in the subject line, "This needs to be responded to in an hour." And that was the subject. And then the email was whatever her request was, or "This can wait until next week, project." And I thought that was it's a woman named Sasha Hoffman. She's really interesting.
I like that.
I thought it was a very interesting way to do it. And I was like, whoa, that's very aggressive. It was all caps all the time. That was literally how she managed her email flow. And she's like, yeah, but honestly, I'm fully transparent with my team. Everyone knows when I'm going to get things done or when I'm expecting things. And she found it very useful. And then people got into the cadence of the typical requests take, X amount of time. And so I guess it just sets a standard. I haven't done that, but I do think it's an interesting idea.
And I heard you've been here for a year?
Almost 2.
2 years. And you've led your team to completely surpass your yearly goals by a landslide. Can you tell us how you've led your team to do that? What is the secret formula?
I think, honestly, there's been two ways. The first is do good, good will come to you. I don't think credit first, right? I think borrower first. What does my client need? How can I be useful? And then you start thinking about risks and mitigants, and so long as the structure is sound, then forget about all the other stuff, quote unquote. I think that's been the first, right? Just focusing really on the client's needs, and not just saying that, but actually doing that, right? And I think a lot of bankers say that they focus on the client's needs, but then the client is kind of scared to tell them when they're going to trip a covenant, right? Those types of things. They're just nervous. To me, the way we lead in new media is, how do we truly have a partnership? And so not only are you going to tell me when you tripped a covenant, I'm going to tell you, hey, by the way, if you don't do X, Y, and Z in 3 months from now, shit's going to go sideways, right? And so I think that's been the first thing. And then the second is focusing simply on what you're good at, as opposed to, the spray and pray mentality. I have a very specific subset of skills and expertise in one kind of industry. And, I think where people get tripped up is, okay, well, how do I do tech, right? Or how do I do media? And that's a very small word with a very large meaning, right? And so being really specific, not trying to be all things to all people, and knowing when you could say yes, knowing when you could say no, and not wasting time has helped us be really, really efficient.
Thank you for all the insights and the tips. This is why you are where you are. And in fact, Chief, an organization that promotes and helps female executives to be in leadership roles and keeping them there, they specifically reached out to you and recruited you to be a founding member of the LA chapter. Can you tell us or give us a little bit of a glimpse on what goes on behind the scenes of Chief, being a part of such a powerful group of women?
So I've been with Chief since June of 2020. And the way it works typically is you're in a cohort, right? So I had a group of me and 9 other females led by a moderator. And on a monthly basis, we met over Zoom typically. And it was part guided meditation, part journaling, right? So they give you prompts all the time to talk about things like, well, what's my superpower, right? And how am I going to expose that more, both in my personal life and my professional life? Or, identify your lowest point of life in the past 5 years and your highest point in life the past 5 years, and how can you create more high points and less low points, and what did you learn from those low points? It's sort of a I want to say a guided reflection, right? Almost part therapy session, but always with a career twist, right? How can you take that and leverage that into your work life? And then there are things like, how do you get onto boards? How do you negotiate your salary? How do you move up? How do you fight for whatever it is you're looking to fight for, at the given moment? And so, it's been really interesting to see so many peers kind of going through the same thing I'm going through, right? Like we all have issues with managerial skills, and we all have, personal issues that we're dealing with and striving forward. And then, there's an element of like, well, there's so many political issues in the world, and how does that relate into your work life, into your personal life, and how do you kind of all tie that up together? And so it's just a really, really interesting forum for female executives to be chatting in.
So you mentioned the highs and the lows. I'm curious to know if you're able to share the low part of your life and what you've learned from that.
My husband and I were pregnant. Well, I was pregnant. My husband was an innocent bystander. And I went into labor. And I had what they call a precipitous labor, which basically means your labor is on steroids. And so what would normally take 20 hours took about an hour. There weren't enough Drake rap songs and like Little John songs I could listen to make that pain go away. It was excruciating. And unbeknownst to me, I was going through like a traumatic event. I was just sort of the last person to know. So my husband and I ran to Cedars. My water broke. They were able to get me up to the room. They were not able to get any heart rate monitors on me. It was sort of like the baby was coming out as I got to the hospital. So I never got an epidural, which was bonkers.
Oh my gosh.
Right? And I gave birth to a baby who wasn't born. He wasn't alive. He wasn't alive. Yeah. Jude. And that was a horrific experience. I don't think anyone should have to suffer that type of loss ever in life. It's not a normal thing for a parent to bury their child. It's just not normal. I've just never experienced that kind of pain before. And so, after the first couple of weeks wore off and that sort of shock wore off, I was left feeling the same feeling of like, but hold on a second, I'm a mom. I don't have like a child. And I was really trying to figure out, what do I do with this information? Like, what do I do with this experience? How do I honor who he was? I'm no longer the person I was before. I'm like this whole different person, right? And so, one thing I noticed was we were really fortunate and we had a very large community, and we both come from very big families. So we had a lot of support around us. But I just kept thinking, like, what about the people who don't, right? What are the people who don't have that type of help? And everyone was coming out and like trying to like share their stories, but I was more consumed with like the logistical help, right? Like we had a dog and I could not bother walking him. I love coffee and I could not bring myself to like walk into Starbucks, right? Like I didn't want my housekeeper in my house anymore. Like I didn't want anyone who saw me pregnant, like in my life, period. End of story. Didn't want it. And so about 6 months after Jude died, Dave and I started our own 501c3. It's called forevermyangel.org. And the entire mission of what we do is just to create logistical support for those who go through stillbirths or neonatal deaths. And, it's like stupid things that you don't even think like you need to take care of, right? Like, who's going to take down your Amazon registry? Like, it's that kind of stuff, right? Who's going to like circumvent the billing process? You don't get a bill from the hospital for that baby that you didn't get to take home, right? Like, who's going to take away the car seat that you installed in the car? Like, it's all these small things that no one thinks about that are such triggering events. Unfortunately, needing to help a lot of people, it's actually a much more common experience than I thought it was. Although when it happened to me, it was the first time I've ever heard of it. So, it's been, I guess, comforting for me to know that even though Jude's not alive, he still taught me how to be a more empathetic person, right? He's taught me to be better, made me better. You always say that about your kids, but I can say this organization and the work we do for it is directly correlated to him. So that feels great. And Ava's middle name is Ava Jude. So she brought us home full circle.
Oh.
Yeah. How do you take adversity and try to, I don't even want to say it's do good, but do something productive with it, right? I think that's sort of the mantra I try to live with. It's not, how do you run away from it? How do you pretend it doesn't exist? How do you put it underneath the carpet and walk away? It's more how do you face it head on and say no, I'm not scared of you. And no, you're not going to take me down. And I think that's kind of how I just live my life.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Reach Further podcast. If you liked what you just saw, there's so much more. Check out the full interview where Maytal gives us more tips on leading a successful team and her thoughts on the future of new media. You do not want to miss this. Go to the description down below for more details or check out our website at eastwestbank.com/reachfurtherpodcast. Until next time.